So you can mute your audio. In the previous session, we have seen what is inheritance and how to use inheritance and different forms of inheritance in Java. So now let us see what are the complications that you will come across when using inheritance. So what do you mean by these complications? Earlier we were using a concept called overloading. Overloading means what? Defining more than one method in the same class with same name but with different number of parameters. So that is nothing but called as overloading. So overloading is nothing but ability to exist in multiple forms. In generally in any object oriented programming languages, not just in Java, you take C++, which was the first object oriented programming language, and then Java after that, and now even Python is also an object oriented programming language. So overloading concept can be not just limited to methods. It can be used for even operators also. C++ supports operator overloading. You can take one operator and give different meaning for that operator. Generally, plus operator, for example, is used for addition of any two numerical values. But you can use that same plus operator to perform some different kind of operation which actually involves addition operation but not on numerical values, something else. So we can redefine that meaning and give an extended meaning or a different meaning than the actual meaning of the operator. So then we call it as a operator overloading, because one same operator will be used in different circumstances for different purposes. So that is called as operator overloading. But coming to Java, Java will not support this operator overloading. C++ and Python supports operator overloading, but Java does not support operator overloading. So there are many features in C++ which were not included in Java. For example, there is another concept called templates in C++. The templates are not used in Java. So Java is a combination of some of the features that are extracted from C language, and some features are extracted from C++, and some topics which are there in C are eliminated. In C++ also some of the topics are eliminated. For example, you take pointers in C, you have these pointers even in C++, but pointers are not there in Java. And C++ inheritance, it supports multiple inheritance, but Java does not support multiple inheritance. So that means there are some additions and subtractions in the concepts when combined together. When you combine C and C++ together, some of the topics are eliminated and some of them are additionally added, and then a new language is created, that is nothing but Java. Okay, so uh, when we talk about this inheritance, we'll come across overloading once again, because superclass may have a method with some name, say x, and you may define again in subclass also with the same name some other method. The name will be same, but the parameters or the number of parameters or type of parameters may be different. Earlier we have seen overloading, but both the method versions are defined in the same class. But now overloading will come into another form. One method is defined in superclass and another method is defined in subclass. They have the same name, but the different number of parameters and type of parameters. So the same overloading concept will be implemented, but in case without inheritance, both the methods are defined in the single class. In case of inheritance, one will be defined in superclass, the other one will be defined in subclass. That is the only difference, right? So overloading can exist with or without inheritance. That means though you don't implement inheritance in your program, then there can exist method overloading. And there is another concept called overriding, which we are going to see later. Overriding means hiding the uh, superclass methods or superclass constructors. What is this actual overriding means? If you define the same method again in the subclass, or it is already defined in superclass, but you try to define it again in the subclass with the same type signature. Overloading is with different type signature, but overriding is with same type signature, and that too overriding will occur only when you use inheritance. When there is no inheritance, there will not be any overriding concept. Okay, the difference between overloading and overriding is overloading will allow the methods to have the same name but different number of parameters or different type of parameters. Coming to overriding, method name will be same and their number of parameters and type of parameters will also be same, but one version will be defined in superclass, the other one will be defined in subclass. So when you create an object for superclass, there is no issue because superclass only has only one version of that method. You can directly call that method with your superclass object. But the problem comes when you create an object for subclass and try to call superclass version, then the superclass version of that method will not be invoked. Instead, subclass version will be invoked. So what is happening to the superclass version of that method means it will be hidden under the shadow of the subclass method version, right? So if that happens, then we call this concept as overriding. So if overriding occurs in your program, how to overcome from that problem and how to access the hidden members of the superclass which are overridden by the subclass. So this can happen for methods and even for constructors also, and sometimes it may happen even for instance variables also. But when the problem arises with normal methods, then we call it as a method overriding. But if it happens with constructors or instance variables, we simply call them as hidden members, hidden constructors or hidden instance variables, right? So let me explain you about this concept with an example program so that you'll understand. I'll show you one program here. uh, uh, to overcome from this hidden members problem and get access to the hidden members, what we need to do. So first let me show you a demonstration of one example program. So did you observe We are creating a class called super. Use capital S here, don't use small s, because there is a keyword in Java called super with small letters, because always all the keywords will be in small letters. uh, if you use small letter s and use the word super, you'll get an error because it is a keyword. So that's why I'm using capital letter S here. Okay, so super is a super class. It has two instance variables a and b, and a constructor is defined which will initialize the a and b values with the parameters a and b respectively. So that's why I'm using this keyword to differentiate between the parameter a and instance variable a. Then the display method is defined, which will display the values of a and b. Now I define another class called sub. This also contains same instance variables a b. The constructor sub is defined which will initialize instance variables a and b with parameters a and b respectively. Then the same display method which will display the values of a and b. Now both these classes do not have any relationship with each other. Now what I'm going to do is I'll make this sub a subclass for superclass. So when I do this, what will happen is, because subclass acquires all the members of superclass, including its own exclusive members, right? Superclass has two instance variables a and b, and even subclass has its own instance variables a and b. So totally altogether, how many instance variables will be there for subclass? Four instance variables will be there. The first two are from the superclass A and B respectively, and the next two are again subclass instance variables. Their name is also A and B. So when you refer here with A here in the system dot out dot println statement A and B, to which A it will be referring, whether it will be referring to the subclass version of AB or superclass version of AB, their names are same, right? If their names are different, then we don't have any problem. Say for example, instead of a and b, if I give here in subclass, if I give x comma y and write here x is equal to a and y is equal to b, then here I'll be accessing, if I access x and y directly, x value and y value will be printed. But if I use a and b, superclass a and b values will be printed, right? So let me show you, uh, by taking, instead of this dot a, I'll use x and y. So let me create the third class which contains the main method. So can you guess what will be the output for this program if I now compile it and run it? You can speak, Srujan.
Sir.
So you carefully go through both the classes, superclass and subclass. Superclass has two instance variables A and B, and we
Yeah.
are using a constructor to initialize those A and B values. So when you create an object for this superclass, you need to pass those two parameters so that with those values A and B instance variables will be initialized. And if you call display method, it will display this A and B values. There is no problem in this class at all. But coming to the subclass, we are creating two instance variables x and y instead of A and B, and passing A and B as parameters to the constructor of subclass, and A is assigned to x and B is assigned to y. But coming to the display method, instead of displaying the values of x and y, I am displaying A and B values,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
in the main method, I am creating object for subclass, not for superclass. Okay, and I'm passing 10 comma 20 as parameters. So what will happen? To which variables this 10 and 20 will be assigned, whether to instance variables of subclass or superclass. So that one point you need to guess. And second point is, when you call the display method, whose values will be displayed? Superclass A, B values will be displayed, or subclass X, Y values will be displayed.
So class sub is extent of A, right?
Yeah, sub
Uh,
is
but
extends
so
A, extends super.
so this is object for. I think it's not going to X value lo you're gonna store in X value, sir. X
Which
and Y,
one? What values will be stored in X and Y?
10 and 20.
Okay, 10 and 20, right? Then
Yeah.
when the display method is called, what will be the output?
10 comma 20. A is equals to 10, B is equals to 20.
But we are accessing in system.out.println A and B values, right? But A and B are not instance variables of subclass. They are declared in superclass. But anyhow, they will become members of subclass also.
Yeah, because in the previous code also it's the same, sir. You gave int A comma B for the first class A, and when coming to class B, we just declare int C.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
they have
so
A, B, C.
yeah,
Subclass will have both A, B, and C also.
yeah,
So similarly here also subclass will have both A and B of superclass as well as X and Y of subclass. Totally four
yeah.
instance variables will be there in subclass.
But the parameter should be more.
Uh, there is no relationship. There is no way related to parameters in the constructor, right?
Okay.
So literally you can imagine that even though you didn't declare A and B here, this will have A and B also as members, right?
Yeah,
It is like if I don't extend this class this way and then declare four variables x, y, a, b. So the same thing is like even if you don't create these variables a and b here, instance variables here, but you are extending super. So the effect will be like that, right? It will have four instance variables. Subclass will have four instance variables x, y, a, and b also. So out of those x, y, a, and b, I'm printing a and b values. I'm not printing x and y values. If I print x and y
yeah,
values, then they'll be displayed as 10 and 20. But I'm displaying a and b values. And these a and b are not the parameters. Okay, they are not parameters because if they are parameters, they can be used only within this constructor. The scope will be limited only to this sub constructor. We cannot access them outside the constructor. So outside the constructor, if you are accessing A and B, they are nothing but instance variables. It will check, your Java operating system will check for if there are any instance variables with that name A and B defined in this class called sub. Yes, there are instance variables, right? A and B. So that's why what will happen? We'll be printing A and B values, but A and B we didn't initialize them, right?
Yeah,
Hmm. So if you don't initialize them, what will happen?
not
Definitely
going to
A
display.
and B will not be displayed. We are not displaying X and Y values. We are displaying only A and B values, and those A and B are instance variables of superclass A because they are also members of subclass. See, you're getting many errors when you make changes. So why this is coming? Because you're creating two instance variables xy.
Yeah,
Subclass
purchases.
along with that instance variables xy, it will also have A and B instance variables also.
Yeah,
It will also have A and B instance variables. So look at the error you're getting. Constructor super in class super cannot be applied to given types. Required int found no arguments. Reason acts on informal argument list differently. Why this is happening? Because we are not creating object for superclass. If you want to access the values of A and B, A and B values must be initialized. Even those values also must be initialized, right? But what we
yeah,
are doing here is we are passing A and B as parameters to this sub constructor, and we are initializing only X and Y. We are not initializing A and B. We should also initialize A and B, right? So what we need to do?
yeah. Parameters low, we need to give
Yeah.
the same thing we did in the previous program.
So now it works. Why this is happening? Let me run the program first and show the output, then we'll discuss about it. So we are displaying only 30 and 40 A and B values. So 10, 20 will be assigned to X and Y. 30 and 40 will be assigned to A and B. So if you display A and B values here, 30 and 40 will be displayed. Now look at how I have written the subclass constructor. So this is strange. Look at this thing. So here, to solve the problem that we were facing till now, earlier we didn't pass 4 parameters, right? We passed only two
Yeah.
parameters, int a and int b. But when you create a constructor, a parameterized constructor, we need to either pass those 4 parameters and initialize uh, all the members of the subclass, including the superclass members also, that is superclass instance variables also. But we were passing only two parameters a and b, and using that a and b we are initializing only x and y, which are exclusive members of subclass. But the subclass also acquires a and b from superclass, but we are not initializing those a and b, right? So that's why what will happen when you try to create an object, when you compile this program, you will get an error here in this part, right? So what we need to do is to initialize the superclass instance variables a and b also. We need to pass 4 parameters to the subclass constructor instead of 2 parameters, because altogether the subclass will have 4 instance variables. Please mute your audio. Altogether you have 4 instance variables in subclass x, y, and a and b from superclass. So we need to pass 4 parameters. So out of these 4 parameters, I'll use the first 2 parameters to initialize the subclass instance variables x and y this way. But how to initialize the superclass instance variables a and b? Instead of directly initializing them here, writing this dot a is equal to some m and this dot b is equal to some n, we cannot do that way. Instead, there is a solution that Java provides to us, that is nothing but a keyword called super keyword. I was telling you about the super keyword, why I didn't use small letter s here for class super. I use super S capital because if I use small letter s, then it will have a conflict with the keyword super. So that's why I didn't use, right? So now I'm using the super keyword here. This super keyword, if you observe, it is just like acting as a method. When will you come across some parenthesis after a identifier, name of a method or something? Only when it is a method or a constructor, right? So I'm passing m comma n as parameters to this super keyword. So what is the super keyword going to do? It will work as a call to the superclass constructor. So what is the immediate superclass for subclass? The class name is itself is super, so this constructor super will be invoked. So for this super keyword, super constructor, m and n values will be passed as parameters. M and n are nothing but the third and fourth parameter for the subclass constructor. So when we created object for subclass, what are the third and fourth parameters you passed? 30 comma 40. So m will have 30 and n will have 40. So the same 30 40, that is m and n, we are passing as parameters to the immediate superclass constructor, that is this one. So that m and n values will be copied into a and b respectively here. So a will be copied with m, b will be copied with n. What is m value? 30. What is n value? 40. So a will be assigned with 30 here and b will be assigned with 40. So these instance variables a and b now will be initialized with 30 and 40 values. Okay. So in that way, altogether we have initialized x and y instance variables of subclass which are exclusive to subclass, and also the superclass instance variables a and b which are also members of subclass, right? So all these four are initialized now. So to do that, what you are doing, subclass instance variables are initialized directly like this, but superclass instance variables, we cannot initialize them directly in the subclass constructor. Instead, we need to make a call to the superclass constructor. How to make a call to the superclass constructor from subclass? By using the super keyword like this. After that, within the parenthesis, how many parameters does the subclass superclass constructor has? Two parameters. Those two parameters you need to pass, right? So that is how you can make a call to the superclass constructor, so that superclass instance variables a and b also will be initialized with some values, not just the subclass instance variables x and y. Even superclass instance variables a and b also will be initialized. So that is the reason why we need to make a call to the superclass constructor using the super keyword like this. And remember one important point: when you make a call to the superclass constructor in this way, uh, that super keyword that you are using must be the first statement in the subclass constructor. You cannot write this statement somewhere after x is equal to a and after y is equal to b like this. You cannot remove this here and you cannot write it here. So if you write it here, then I'll get an error. So let me compile it and show it to you again. Okay. I didn't save the program, so that's why I'm getting. See, what is the error you're getting? Call to super must be the first statement in constructor. So you cannot write super statement, super constructor statement, this one, in the middle or at the end of the subclass constructor. You need to write it only as the first statement in the subclass constructor. So remove it from here and write it here. Okay, so this is one purpose, this is one kind of problem that we'll face when we use inheritance, right? Because superclass has some two different instance variables and subclass has two different instance variables. But if you are using a constructor in both the classes, a subclass constructor will be able to initialize only the subclass instance variables x and y, but it will not be able to initialize the superclass instance variables a and b. So to overcome that, what we need to do is we need to use the super keyword, right? So this is one purpose. Super keyword has many other purposes. That means it has two more purposes. Totally it has three purposes. So out of which first purpose is to invoke the superclass constructor. So when you invoke the superclass constructor, what is superclass constructor going to do? It is going to initialize the superclass instance variables a and b which were not initialized by subclass. Right? Subclass constructor is initializing only x and y. It is not initializing a and b, which are members of superclass. So to do that, what we need to do in the subclass constructor, the first statement itself, you need to write this statement. Use the super keyword like this. The keyword will be in small letters only, definitely. It is a rule in Java, all the keywords will be in small letters, right? And then within the parenthesis, you need to pass the parameters. How many parameters does the superclass constructor receives? Two parameters, and they are of integer type. So we need to pass same two integer parameters like this. So m and n are nothing but the parameters passed to the subclass constructor, that is 30 and 40. So the same 30 and 40 which are received by the subclass constructor will in turn be passed as parameters to superclass constructor directly. They will not be used for any other purpose. They will be directly passed to superclass constructor. And whereas the first two parameters a and b will be used to initialize x and y of the instance variables of the subclass. So altogether, all the four instance variables will be initialized now. Okay, this is one purpose of super keyword. So now uh, in subclass I have used x and y as instance variables, right? In superclass I have used a and b. Okay, so let me give, instead of x and y, a and b here also. So then what will happen? Earlier when we used x and y, uh, and when you are displaying the a and b values, superclass instance variables a and b values were displayed. But now what I am doing, even in subclass also I am using a and b. I am using a and b. So now what is this system.out.println statement going to display? Which a and b values it is going to display? Whether it is going to display this a and b values or this a and b values. They are different. These are instance variables of superclass and these are instance variables of subclass. But because subclass acquires the instance variables of superclass also, now there is a conflict. There will be two instance variables in subclass with same name, that is a, and there will be two instance variables with same name, that is b. So there is a conflict for both a and b. So how to differentiate between a and b of subclass and a and b of superclass, that we need to see. So for that also again we need to use superclass super keyword. But before that, let me show you what will happen if you simply directly access these instance variables with their names without using the super keyword. So I'll compile this program now and show the output for you. So you're getting an error, cannot find symbol x, cannot find symbol y, because I didn't change this. Now I have to use this dot a because instance variable a is same, you have name instance variable a and also parameter a. So there will be conflict between this parameter a and instance variable a. So I have to use this dot a. Similarly, instead of y we have b, right? So you have to write it as this dot b. Or else let us change these parameter names. Instead of a we'll use uh, p and q, so that we need not use this keyword. There will not be much confusion because you are having a as parameters to the subclass constructor, and in another instance you have instance variables also in the same subclass a and b, and again in superclass also you have a and b. So that will lead to more confusion. So let me take, instead of a and b as parameters, p and q. So here instead of a is equal to a like this, I'll write p. Here I'll write q, right? So subclass constructor receives pqmn. P and Q are assigned to instance variables a and b, that is so subclass instance variables, and uh, m and n are passed as parameters to superclass constructor. So this dot a, this dot b will be assigned with those two values. But subclass has instance variables a and b, and superclass also has instance variables a and b. And when you create an object for subclass and call this display method and display a and b values, which a and b values will be displayed? Whether the subclass a and b values will be displayed or superclass a and b values will be displayed, that we need to see, right? So let me show you. So now you'll not get any errors because we changed their names. So now let me run the program. So a value 10 and b value 20, these are displayed. So that means what? The first two parameters 10 and 20, uh, third and fourth are 30 40. So they will be stored into pqmn. So that means here let me write it in comment. P will be receiving 10, q will be receiving 20, m will be receiving 30, n will be receiving 40, right? Because when we created object for the subclass constructor we pass those four values. So those four values will be copied into these four parameters. So as such, p will have 10, q will have 20, m will have 30, and n will have 40. So now what I am doing, as the first statement, I am making a call to the superclass constructor and passing m and n. M and n values are 30, 40. So they will be passed to the superclass constructor a and b, right? So here let me write, a will be copied with what? M and n values. What is m value? 30. N value is 40. So a will receive 30 here and b will receive 40. So you are assigning a value 30 and b value 40 to the instance variable a and instance variable b respectively, like this. So now what will be instance variable a value? 30, and instance variable b value will be 40. Okay. So, and in this constructor, when you come back to this constructor here, subclass constructor, after invoking the superclass constructor, these statements will be executed in the superclass constructor, these statements, and after that you will return back to this place where you call the superclass constructor. So what is the next statement here? A is equal to p. So here a means what? This instance variable a. So this will be assigned with value p. P value is 10, and b will be assigned with q. Q value is 20. So a value is 10 and b value is 20 here. This is 10 and this is 20 here. So subclass instance variable a and b will have 10 and 20 respectively. Superclass instance variable a and b will have 30 and 40 respectively. Okay, but when you print those values by calling display method, by calling this display method, what is happening? Which values are displayed? Here in this a and b values, in the output you see 10 and 20 is displayed. So 10 and 20 are values for which one? Subclass instance variables a and b. But you are not able to print the superclass instance variable a and b. So that means what? Subclass instance variables, if they have same name as that of superclass instance variables, then when you create an object for subclass and access those instance variables with that subclass object, uh, subclass instance variables will hide the superclass instance variable. That is what happening, right? This a and b are hiding superclass instance variables a and b. That's why superclass instance variables a and b will not be accessed. They cannot be accessed, right? So if you want to make access instance variables of superclass, that is a and b of superclass, what we can do, we must call the display method of superclass. But what is happening, even this superclass display method is also part of subclass, and subclass also has its own instance method display with same type signature. If you observe, in subclass you have void display without any parameters. So the return type is same, the method name is same, and parameters are also no parameters. And even in superclass also you have return type void, name of the method is display, and there are no parameters. That means the number of parameters is same, the type of parameters is same, and the method name is also same, right? So now what is happening? The superclass method display, which has same name as that of this same type signature as that of the subclass display method, is being hidden, or you can say overridden, right? We say that subclass display method is overriding the superclass display method. So if the subclass method hides the superclass method, we call that as overriding. And if subclass instance variables are hiding the superclass instance variable, we simply call it as hidden, is hiding the instance variables. So how to access these two types of members? How to access the superclass instance variables, and how to access superclass methods which are overridden by the subclass method, right? So for that also we need to use the super keyword. So I told you super keyword has three purposes, right? First purpose is to access the superclass constructor, which will not be invoked by simply creating an object for subclass. You're not creating for superclass. If you're creating for superclass an object, then superclass constructor will be automatically called. But because you're not invoking, you're not creating object for superclass and you're creating object only for subclass, it is our responsibility to see that even the superclass constructor is also invoked. And how to do that? By using the super keyword, this one. This is the first purpose of the super keyword. Now coming to the second purpose, uh, superclass has instance variables with same name a, b, and even subclass also has its own instance variables a and b. But because subclass extends superclass and superclass a and b also will be inherited to subclass, so now subclass will have four instance variables, out of which uh, two instance variables have same name a and two instance variables have same name b. And when you try to access a and b values in this class by using the subclass object, the super subclass instance variables a and b will be accessed, and superclass instance variables a and b will be hidden. So how to access those hidden superclass instance variables? So if you want to access superclass instance variables a, b instead of subclass instance variable a and b, so instead of directly accessing a here, you need to use the keyword super as an object and use dot operator here, super dot a. So when you write super dot a, it refers to the superclass instance variable a. If you write simply a, it refers to the subclass instance variable a. Similarly for b also, if I use super dot b, it refers to superclass instance variable b. If I simply use b, it will be referring to the subclass instance variable b, right? So now that I have uh, used the super keyword here, let me see when I call the display method here, uh, whether this is going to display superclass instance variable 30 40 value or subclass instance variable a b, that is 10 and 20. Earlier it was displaying subclass instance variable a and b values, that is 10 and 20 in the output, right? So 10 and 20. So now we made the change. So let us compile the program again and run the program. So now what values are displayed? 30 40. So instead of subclass instance variable a and b, we are printing superclass instance variable a and b, their values are 30 40. If you want to access both of them, then use one more instance variable, and here you mention when you want to access subclass instance variables directly, you can use a and b, no need of super keyword, like this. So now if I make a call, now I'll compile this program again. So both the values are accessed. First superclass a and b values are accessed, a is 30 and b is 40, and then later subclass a and b, a is equal to 10 and b is equal to 20, right? So when to use this super keyword to access the superclass instance variables? Only when both the instance variable, that is in superclass you have the same name a and b, and even in subclass also you have same name a and b. So it may be ab, abc, abcd, any how many number of instance variables you have, that many, right? But if you have a different name here, instead of a and b, if you have x and y, then there is no issue at all because their names are different. If you can access them directly with their names a, b, x, y, like that. So their values will be automatically printed. When to use super keyword? Only when superclass instance variables have same name as that of the subclass instance variable. It may be one instance variable, or it may be two instance variables, or it may be n number of instance variables, right? In our example, there are two instance variables. It may be only one instance variable in some other case. In some other case, it may be three, it may be 10, right? Whatever it is.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
If subclass doesn't extend superclass, we can use the super keyword.
Super keyword will be used only for three purposes. Let me
Okay.
write those purposes here in another file.
Okay.
So the first purpose is to invoke the superclass constructor, right? When you'll be invoking superclass constructor, that too when you don't create an object for superclass. If you don't create an object for superclass, then automatically the superclass constructor will not be executed, right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in our program, what we are doing, we are creating an object only for subclass. So when you create an object for subclass, the subclass constructor only will be executed. Superclass constructor will not be executed. So you don't want to create an object for superclass, but you want the superclass constructor to be invoked. Then we have to use this super keyword like this in the subclass constructor as the first statement. That is the first purpose of the super keyword.
Okay.
Okay, but if you are not defining these parameterized constructors in superclass and subclass, then there is no problem at all. Got my point? If you're not using this
Okay, sir.
parameterized constructor, then there will be default constructor, right?
Yeah.
There will be a default
Yeah.
constructor. So the default constructor will be automatically invoked by subclass object first and then superclass object. So I'll show that version also tomorrow,
Okay, sir.
right? So first purpose is to invoke superclass constructor. Second purpose is to access the hidden instance variables of superclass using subclass object,
Okay, sir.
right? So in our program, superclass has two instance variables a and b, and subclass has two instance variables a and b. So subclass a and b are hiding the superclass a and b. So that's why we are unable to access superclass a and b, because we didn't create object for superclass. We create an object only for subclass. I don't want to create an object for superclass. That is my intention, right? So that's the reason why we will not be able to access a and b of superclass. But how to access them by using only subclass object means in the second purpose, using the super keyword, you can access them in the subclass like this: super dot a, super dot b. So when you write super dot a, super dot b, it refers to the superclass instance variables a and b, right? When you write super a and b, it refers to the subclass a and b. Please mute your audio. I'm getting disturbance. So this is the second purpose. Third purpose is so to access hidden methods of superclass using subclass object. So we didn't discuss this point, third point. Uh, in the main method, I'm calling display method using subob. Subob is an object for subclass, right? But subclass will have two different versions of display method. Uh, its own version of display method, this one. This is displaying both the superclass instance variable a, b, and subclass instance variable a and b. But we have also defined another display method version in superclass also. So this also will be the member of subclass, right? Because we are extending superclass. So this also will become a member of subclass, right? So what is happening? There are two methods with the same signature and with same name, that is display. But when you call the display method using the subclass object, which version is being called? This version is being called, right? But this will not be invoked. Why? Because the subclass version of this display method is overriding the superclass version of the display method. This is called as overriding. If the subclass has the same method signature as that of the superclass method, then the superclass method will be hidden by the subclass when you try to invoke that method using the subclass object. When you are using superclass object, then automatically superclass display method will be invoked. The problem comes only when you create subclass object, right? So now in our program, we have created object for subclass only, so that's why we'll come across this problem. So this display method will be hidden. So if the subclass version of the display method is hiding the superclass version of the display method, we call this concept as overriding. Method overriding. And this method overriding comes into picture only when we use inheritance. Earlier we didn't use inheritance, we'll not come across that problem. Your class will not allow you to define two methods with the same type signature in the same class, right? So that's why you'll not come across this problem there. But when you use inheritance, you are defining the same signature methods in two different classes. One is superclass, the other one is subclass. So then the problem comes when you create an object for subclass, right? So what if you want to invoke superclass constructor, superclass display method? So you can call that superclass display method also by using this super keyword. By using this super keyword, you can make a call from display method. I'll use super keyword like this, dot, the method name is what? Display. Okay, so now let me compile the program and see. So superclass display method is displaying a value 30, b value 40, and subclass display method is displaying these two statements, right? So I'll mention here, okay, so that the output it will display in subclass a value 30 and b value 40, and here I'll display this is in superclass and this is in subclass. So now see, the display method of superclass is invoked, so it is displaying in superclass a is 30, b is 40. Then after that, subclass display method is displaying in subclass superclass a and b is 30, 40, subclass a and b is 10, 20, right? So how I am calling that the superclass display method, which is overridden by the subclass display method, by using the super keyword as an object, dot, the method name display, right? So we have used in the same way to call the constructor, but there we will not use super as an object. Instead, we'll use the super as a name to refer to the constructor, right? And that constructor is also immediate superclass constructor, not at a different level. If you are using multi-level inheritance, say for example, okay, then this subclass is the subclass for superclass. And if suppose this superclass is another subclass for another class, say A, then that constructor will not be invoked by this subclass constructor. It will be invoking only in the next immediate level of the uh, constructor superclass, immediate superclass. So what is meant by immediate superclass? So now let us say this is a multi-level inheritance. A has one subclass B, and again B has another subclass C. So in C's constructor, if I use super keyword to call superclass constructor, that super constructor will be called only of that of B's, not A. So which is the immediate superclass for C? B is the immediate superclass for B. A will not be immediate superclass, right? But coming to B, its immediate superclass is A. So if you are using multi-level inheritance, then the super keyword must be used to call the constructors from C class constructor as well as from B class constructor. So this we'll see tomorrow. So please remember this point and remind me tomorrow. We'll discuss this point and another point also we discussed. Without using constructors also we'll write some programs. In this program we have used constructors, right? So tomorrow again we'll see multi-level inheritance implemented with constructors and using super keyword. And apart from that, we'll also see without defining constructors in inheritance concept, uh, what will happen, how to use super keyword. Okay,
Sir, we cannot do with the method, sir, instead of constructor.
we can do with methods. That is what I'm saying. Tomorrow we'll see with methods instead of constructor. You
Okay,
can
sir.
define a method
Oh,
to initialize. Uh, so
oh,
super is used to initialize A and B, right? So instead of constructor, if I
yeah.
use another method, say read method, so that will also do, right? So in that case, you'll not have any problem because read will not be a constructor, right? So that will become a
Oh,
normal method. So that normal method can be called from subclass using basically an object. So a subclass of an object, we call that read method.
okay, okay, I understood.
So that concept we'll see tomorrow, right? So but
Okay,
today this is a lengthy topic. It will not be completed within a single class. It will take multiple classes, 2 or 3 classes,
okay,
right? So already we have extended today for 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Fine. So you
okay,
I have recorded this video. What you will do is, once again, I'll upload this video in YouTube and share you the link. You go through that video once again,
okay, sir.
for so that you will get understanding once again. If you have any confusion, that will be cleared. And furthermore, if you still have any confusion, it will be cleared tomorrow.
Okay,
Okay, so we'll
okay,
continue
sir.
tomorrow.
Okay, sir. Sure.